Hey everybody, it's Steve the Hurricane here, and I am super excited for this webinar today, as it's been a while since we've had a public webinar, and there's so many things that are happening, and I hope that your year is going well. As crazy as it sounds, folks, and I know that this is it's going to hit a lot of us harder than maybe we realize, but in 2 weeks, 2021 is half over. I can't believe it, right? Like it's crazy how fast this year is going by. And I think part of the reason why it's so crazy that the year is going by so fast is because of just how much of a whirlwind this year was. I mean, you think back to January, there was a change in the White House. Then it was like February and March and April, it was all about, vaccinations and open up America. And then things did open up in May, and we're still trying to run our business. And then there's inflation and everything is just happening. It's just like, holy crap. Like I just need like to take a moment and sit down and breathe, because that's how fast things are going by with everything just on the national stage here as we're moving forward. But as always, this is one of my favorite public webinars to do. I think this is my third time doing this particular topic, and my second time doing it with our guest speaker, who I'll introduce in a second here. But what I love about this webinar is we take all of the data from the most recent home care pulse report, and we pick 7 to 12 different document points, and then we talk about it in all things to scale and generate maximum revenue for the remainder of this year. Because when you know the trends of the industry and you know these KPIs that were collected, and then you take a look at your own organization and say, hey, where do I stand compared to everybody else? If I'm below where everybody else is, then I know I need to invest in training, support, consulting, whatever it is, or something I got to do differently to get it to at least industry standards. If I'm at the industry standard, well, that's good, but I want to do better than that. Well, then again, invest to get to the next level. And if I am doing better, great. I want to continue to keep operating as we are, because we're moving in the right direction. That's how we scale and grow a business, not just a home care business, any business, but obviously this is specific to home care. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. That's what we're going to go through. And as promised to all of you, I love having live events like this, right? So this is a live meeting. And with the live meeting here, you're all with me right now. And so for the people who are live, like we're going to record this, the recording will be available at a later time and you can watch it later on. But I like to reward the people who are on live. So at the very end of this webinar, when we finish, I'm going to give away a free gift. It's $1,000 value to one lucky person who is on this webinar live with us. So from me to you, thank you for joining us live and staying with us this hour. You now have a chance at winning a $1,000 prize, courtesy of me to you, thanking you for being on this. All right. And so as we're getting started here, the next thing I want to do is I want to let you know about a huge announcement. The huge announcement really is based off of, again, the successes of my clients that we've had last year, and knowing the home care pulse data is something we're not going to get too much into, is the revenue growth. But the home care pulse data showed that last year the industry standard revenue growth was about 7.8% more than what they did in 2019. So that means the average agency around the country grew their revenue and made almost 8% more in total revenue than they did in 2019. The masters of the industry, the people who are the top, the best of the best, the people generating over $5 million in revenue, well, those folks did almost twice what the industry average was. But what I'm excited about is my clients last year during the pandemic, they actually did more than twice what the masters were doing, and almost 40% revenue increase from what they did in 2019. And that's because of the systems and the things that we teach people to do. And so the huge announcement that I have is the return of the home care marketing boot camp. And so we are doing our in-person home care millionaires boot camp this November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Now, I'm telling you about this now because we're launching it. Early bird tickets are on sale. The full price ticket for this event is $999. So it's a $1,000 ticket. It is a 3-day in-person conference. The one thing that I know right now, as of right now today, from what I've heard, there isn't a single in-person conference for the rest of this year that's scheduled because of all the challenges with the hotels and getting places. We got the contract signed. It's already set. There isn't a Decision Health conference this year. There isn't a Home Care Association of America in-person conference. They're all doing virtual. If you want to come to a conference, if you want to know how to scale your business, you got to come to this event. Early bird tickets are on sale right now. You can go to the website. Only $499. I'm sorry, $599. So you save $400 off the full price during the early bird period. And the crazy spot, we already have 50 people coming. That's 20% of the max capacity. This event is going to sell out. I actually did a small boot camp a couple weeks ago. I called it the secret boot camp. As we had so many people who had a free ticket from a boot camp we had to cancel last year because of COVID. And we decided to do a test run and invite people to come to it. And we had 100 people that showed 3 days. It was absolutely amazing. And it was the perfect way to just put COVID in the rearview mirror as we're moving away from it. So the content of this, all of the topics are still being calculated, but it'll actually be about scaling your home care business, sales and marketing, operations and leadership, and of course, caregiver recruitment and retention. So it's a triple focus on all things to scale your business, really how to take your business from where it is today to grow it as high as 8 figures in revenue, which is over $10 million. That's the focus of this event. Can't afford to miss it. I'll see you in November. It's going to sell out. Get your early bird ticket now. So with all that being said, 5 minutes into the top of the hour here, I want to introduce you to my co-host and my partner in crime on this webinar, Mr. Tyler Guthrie. Tyler has been with Home Care Pulse for many years now. Many of you know he leads their sales and marketing department. He's involved with all of the education and the training and the onboarding and the promoting of the Pulse study itself. He analyzes all the data that comes out. He's an industry authority and an expert himself, and he and I are good friends. We talk often. Heck, during this last year with the pandemic, we spoke very frequently, and we got very accustomed to working together via Zoom and GoToWebinar and everything else. And so, you know, I'm just excited to have him here because as we're going to be talking about the best practices for increasing revenue in 2021, the second half of this year, you know, we're going to be looking at the data and what does the Pulse say, and let's get some deeper insights as to what the metrics mean and how we can adapt so that we can thrive for the rest of this year. So Tyler, how you doing, my friend?
Doing awesome. Thanks for the intro, Steve. I appreciate that. It's a lot to live up to.
You're going to do just fine. This isn't our first rodeo. But I'm glad to have you here, my friend. So let's jump right into it. So the first slide that we're going to touch base on and talk about is obviously, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because there's other slides because we're all aware of this. But, you know, this is the caregiver turnover rate. And the only question that I have on this, and I'll let you explain obviously where this data came from, but as I look at this data here, I'm going to say it's safe to say that pretty much 65% is the trend over the last 5 or so years. That 2018, is that like an anomaly or what happened that threw that one off so much? Because I'm going to guess that it's 65 is probably the most accurate number here.
Yeah, that's right. From what we've seen, caregiver turnover has been relatively flat despite the anomaly in 2018. That's that's a whole nother webinar to dive into the details of that. But the good news here, not that 65% is a real good news number, but what we were kind of biting our nails for is to see what happened in 2020. And when the numbers came in, we were grateful that the numbers remained flat and that it wasn't any worse than we were last year, really, which was good to see that things are a little bit stable there. We are seeing that agencies are reporting more and more that they're being impacted negatively by caregiver shortages, and turnover certainly does impact that. I would say that we can breathe a little sigh of relief that things have remained stable, but we certainly still have a lot of work to do with 65%. That's not a number that we can completely be content with.
Tyler, I agree with you 100%. When I talk with my clients as a consultant, I always tell them that, you know, if your numbers are 65% and that's the industry average, don't sleep on that, you know, because the industry, that's really bad. You know, we need to get that better. And many of my clients, through a lot of the things that we train people on and work with them on, have a 25% or 20% even turnover ratio year to year. And that is something to definitely be proud of. So to you, our audience who are listening here, two things I can share with you real quick to focus on to help reduce that turnover ratio from 65% down to 25%. Two things. Number one, having shift work mentality when you're hiring. So this is where I talk a lot about having a 20-hour-a-week minimum, how to build it out where it's literally 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 7 days, 4 hours, but it's 4-hour shifts and not 4-hour shifts 2 or 3 days. It's got to be at least 5 days a week. There's a lot that goes into it. That's time for another topic or something else, but that is something I focus on heavily with my clients so that they can build their operation around hiring caregivers that have a shift work mindset. You think about a caregiver, how much money does a caregiver make? All right, what are the other positions that a caregiver can earn the same income? All other positions, warehouse work, restaurants, hotel, hospitality, and maintenance and housekeeping, those are all shift work industries, right? So a caregiver comes in, they work 40 hours a week, shift work, same schedule week in and week out. We have to be able to match that because that's the way the mindset of our labor workforce has. So you build it around that 20-hour minimum. The other point that I would say goes to making sure that you're charging what you have to in order to attract caregivers. So caregivers are leaving, caregivers don't want to work. We'll touch on that a little bit later on. But if caregivers are commanding $15 an hour, that means you have to charge $30 an hour. And if caregivers are commanding $17 an hour, that means you have to charge $34 an hour. Not going to get into the sales, not going to get into the processes and closing ratios and everything else. I do a lot of that with my clients one-on-one. That's how they can charge these higher rates. But to the point of, you've got to keep your caregiver's compensation 50% of what you're charging. If you're paying out 15, 16, that means you have to charge 30, 32. And the markets around the country where this has already happened with the $15 minimum wage, like I think about Seattle, Washington, some places in California and whatnot, they've already been doing this for years. Like, yeah, Steve, I already know I'm charging $34 an hour, I'm charging $36 an hour, and it does make a difference. So, you know, for those of you who are in markets where you've been charging less, it is what it is. The good news right now, everything in the country, inflation is kind of like national news. You can totally leverage that to your advantage as cost justification for getting caregivers these days. Next slide, my friend, is the caregiver recruitment sources and the turnover by each source. So what is your take on this information here?
Yeah, so one of the obvious things that sticks out here is that there's a lot of high volume recruitment sources that agencies lean on. A lot of these digital sources that are kind of can be a little bit of a revolving door. You can get caregivers quickly, but they won't stay as long. And so we're looking at the turnover rate here of these different sources, and you can see that Indeed, you know, one of the top recruitment sources from the benchmarking study that we've identified, they're top source, but they're also the one with the highest turnover rate. So as you're forming your recruitment strategy, you have to be aware of what the turnover is by source. And you also should be tracking that for your agency. So this is the national median numbers, but you need to find what works for your agency. But what we're seeing across the board is that when you focus on experience, and when you focus on your client experience and caregiver experience, you are able to leverage that as a recruitment source, and you're able to get a much lower turnover rate there. So you can see the bar in dark blue here. When you recruit from your employees, it's almost a 10% lower turnover rate. And when you get referrals through word of mouth, through reputation, through the reputation that you have in your community, it's even lower. So that's what you need to invest in. It's easier to be reactive in the home care space. There's a lot of crises that we are constantly dealing with. And it's easy to get into the short-term thinking, but if you can shift gears and build a long-term strategy for caregiver turnover and for recruitment, that's where you'll see the success. And that's by focusing on your employees and your reputation.
Tyler, I love what you said there, and it is interesting. So one slide that I don't have in here is where Home Care Pulse went through and they gathered what are the best top 10 referral sources or where people are getting it from. And he did say it though, that Indeed was #1. And so while on one hand, it's like, all right, so 30% of the caregivers that were hired in the industry came from Indeed, it also has the highest turnover. And so I guess what I would say as a consultant, hearing what Tyler just said right now, I would take this as I would go back, and if I were you, home care agency owners, I would take a look at what am I spending and how much does it cost me to get each caregiver at each source type, right? So how much does it cost me to get a caregiver from Indeed? How much does it cost me to get a caregiver from my CNA? How much am I spending on social media marketing? And what is the annual cost broken down by how many caregivers I got from it? So what does it cost me to get one caregiver from social media and this and here? As I look at those costs, cost justification, and then I'm going to go back and calculate also that turnover rate per source as well. So say, I have just use the industry average here. 76% turnover from Indeed, and Indeed also costs me the most amount of money. Like if I'm spending the most and it has the worst performance, maybe I'll spend a little bit less. Like maybe I'm not going to take it all away, but I'm going to spend a little bit less money here, and maybe I'm going to take a look and well, wait a second here. The employee referral bonus program, the industry average is 63%, but my average was 40% turnover, right? So maybe I'm going to put some money from Indeed, the same money, put a little bit more effort and money into this over here, and that's going to give me a better return on investment. So just take a look at what, again, these KPIs, we're trying to help you figure out how to maximize your revenue potential. If your revenue stayed the same, but we're working smarter, not harder, by being more efficient because of understanding these KPIs, that's going to really help that bottom line when we get to profit and loss later on in the presentation, and obviously real life profit and loss for our businesses as we move forward into 2022. The next slide, Tyler, right here is the revenue per caregiver. I know when you and I were talking the other day about this is something that we got to improve as an industry, but you want to talk a little bit about where these numbers came from, how it was calculated, and what this means to an agency owner when they hire a caregiver?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So a little background on this one. This metric, the purpose of it is to give you an idea of the value that each caregiver is bringing to your organization over the duration that they're working for you. And you can see it off to the right here. It explains how you calculate this. You take annual revenue and you divide that by the number of caregivers that you employed, and then you multiply that by your average length of employment. And another quick note here too is that in some past years and in some past webinars, we've referred to this as caregiver lifetime value. And so we've refreshed the name here a little bit, but it's the same metric. So the obvious takeaway here, what stands out is that when agencies are new and starting out, they haven't learned yet to maximize the revenue that they're getting per employee. But as agencies scale and as you get to this master's level of 5 million plus, those agencies are getting about twice as much value per caregiver that they employ. And I think that some of that is due to some higher billing rates. There's a lot of factors that go into this, but one of the findings that we've unpacked as we've dissected the data in the study is that a way to increase this, the value that you're getting per caregiver, is by focusing on training and orientation and ongoing training. So I've got some other numbers I'll throw out here. If you're providing 8 hours or more of orientation training, that increases the revenue per caregiver by $4,500. So it's a 42% increase if you can increase to 8 hours or more at orientation. And then in addition to that, ongoing training for the year, if you can increase that to 12 or more ongoing, as opposed to 4, that's a $2,300 increase in revenue per caregiver. So that's another 12% increase on your revenue per caregiver. So it's little nuggets like this, why we love the benchmarking study, and why we think that there's so much value in dissecting this data and pulling some of these insights, because that's beneficial to know that if you focus and invest in your caregivers at the beginning, you'll reap the rewards over the time that caregiver is with you. And there's a quote that we've probably repeated multiple times now on our webinars, but we've come across agencies that are worried that what if I invest heavily in my caregivers and they leave and they go to my competitor? But what we really need to be asking ourselves is, what if we don't invest in them and they stay? I think it's a given that we have to invest in our caregivers and train them as much as possible in order to reap the value of those those benefits on an ongoing basis. So I think that that's a little nugget here that I can share, something that you can note down to look at how many hours you are providing of orientation training and ongoing training.
Tyler, I love everything you said. That was absolutely fantastic. So just to kind of reiterate it for everybody there who's listening here, you notice what he said. More time spent at orientation equals $4,500 increase to the revenue generated from that caregiver over these numbers. He talked about, ongoing training as the caregiver is working for you, adds an additional, $2,000 something in revenue towards the revenue generated by a caregiver. And that's real, that does add a difference. When I look at this here, this says to me that if I have a caregiver who's say I'm in this group over here, right? This middle tier, I call this the $1.5 million to $3 million group. I pretty much call this, right? $14,000 is not a lot of money. I mean, this tells me that if I'm generating $14,000 per caregiver, that means that caregiver is probably with me for about 3 months. That's what that is, because 3 months full time, caregiver is only going to be making half of that, which is $7,000, and my company's only getting 40. That's not. We got to do a better job. This number should be 3 times this number, right? But I love what Tyler said, and that actually references back to something from years past that you had, Tyler, in the study, the top 10 complaints of caregivers and why caregivers feel that they aren't supported, right? And in the top 10 complaints that you had, it talked about how caregivers said that they didn't feel like they had enough information to properly take care of the patient. So here you have a caregiver, they walk in the house, and I know the nature of our caregivers, this is their first job in home care. And so they walk into a house, we set them up, and then they leave. They didn't feel adequate taking care of this person, so they walk off the case because they probably were afraid that they're going to hurt this person. And now we've lost that caregiver from our agency, but chances are that person probably will never stay in the industry, and they'll probably go somewhere else because of the inadequate training. So I love how you put it there. When we give our caregivers more training and orientation, yes, it's more work, yes, it's more effort, but that also gets them to stay with us longer, which means they're going to generate more revenue for us during their life cycle with us. That was beautiful. And I also love that analogy you said too, Tyler. It makes me laugh because I had a couple of clients over the years who said basically the same thing to me about sales and marketing reps. Why am I going to invest all this money in a marketing rep and train them so that if they leave me or when they leave me, they're going to go somewhere else and make the money for somebody else? And my response to that person is, so you mean to tell me that you have a marketing rep on your team right now and you don't want them making as much money as they can for your business, so you're not going to train them so that in the event that if they leave you, then they're not going to have the training to do something else? That doesn't make any sense. And the guy goes, well, when you say it like that, all right, let's sign up. And he became a customer. It was like the funniest thing, but I had to laugh at that because it is crazy. Like, yeah, I understand you may lose this person, but we want them to be as productive as they can during their time because the benefit is to my business now. So it totally makes sense, Tyler. I love it. Audience, by the way, we're going to do a Q&A session at the end here. So I see some questions. If you have questions about any of these things, go ahead and type the questions where it says questions. At the end, Tyler and I will stay on for a little bit and we'll answer all your questions, all right? So please feel free to ask those questions. This is for you, all right? Next point we're going to bring up is about the office staff and how many people should we have in our office. And what I love about this stat right here is actually talking about my Home Care Elite Academy clients yesterday on a big group call. I always look at the median number and I say, if your revenue is on the high, if your office staff is on the higher side, then please make sure you're at the higher side of the tier that you're in. Otherwise, you might be too staff heavy. On the flip side, I always say that if you're on the lower side, maybe you don't have enough help, and maybe that's the reason why you're so stressed out and you're burnt out and everything else. But what do you want to say to this chart right here, Tyler? What can people take away from this as a good focal point for their businesses?
Yeah. So if you're evaluating, where you need to be at, you can find, which category you fall into on this chart. But I would also say, in addition to this chart, a good companion would be, looking at revenue per full-time employee and looking at benchmarks there. We've got benchmarks in the study and that you can reference in order to see where you should be at along with this. What we've seen, this year in comparison to last year is that fortunately things have remained pretty stable, especially at the median level. Comparing back to last year's study, this has been it has been pretty consistent. If you look on the far right column, 2020 median, that is virtually identical to what it was last year, except for the 95th percentile shot up by 4. So at the high end, we saw agencies adding staff at the 95th percentile, but everything else stayed pretty consistent, which I think overall is a win for 2020, given that so many companies are laying off employees. If we're able to stay the course and keep our keep our averages, then I think that's a win for us.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And yeah, it is interesting because I did notice that myself too. And look at the masters. But again, I'm thinking about the masters. These are people over 5 million. Somebody with 89 employees, they could literally be generating like $30 million in revenue. And for a business that size, you're going to need almost 90 employees. So that totally makes sense.
So one other thing I'll interject here is that agencies that are below 1.6 million, if they're below that threshold, we did see a little bit of an increase in staff by 0.5 or 1 or so over this year to last year to this year, I should say. So we're seeing a little bit of an increase there. As we get to this next slide, there's a lot to dissect, and I'll share a few other insights there and where we're seeing people get hired. But there's a lot to be grateful for in that we've remained relatively stable as an industry. Kind of same story with caregiver turnover that's remained flat. So that's good to see.
It's interesting you mentioned that in this group over here, it went up a little bit. And just touching on it for a second, I almost wonder if that has to do with state to state regulation changes. Like I know, like here in New Jersey, where my base of operations is, it's required that you have a nurse on staff now. That is something that wasn't required in years past. So if you have to have something now because of regulation or a compliance change, then that would make an additional person down here be noticeable versus over here where it's gonna kind of just blend in.
That's a good insight. And one other area where we've seen more staff hired is with staffing coordinators and schedulers. We've seen a few more get added to agencies, and I think that's a good trend, considering that one of the top complaints, as I think you mentioned, Steve, is that caregivers complain about communication from office staff. And on the client side, we look at top complaints on an annual basis, and communication is a big issue there too. And so making sure that you're well staffed with your schedulers can have a big impact on your agency.
I love it. I love it. So this is the one that I want to spend just a little bit of time with you on, because this is something that really jumped out to me. And every single person on this, if you're a business owner, if you're not a business owner, get the owner's attention on this, because this is really huge to take a note of. It was the profit loss statement, and the reason why I'm so like I freaked out when I first saw this. Is for the people who are in this category here, this is the under $1 million in annual revenue category. Unless you're in your first year start up, which that makes sense, you spend more money than you make it's your first year. But if you're in your second, third, or fourth year and you're still under $1 million in revenue, knowing that the industry average here, when you add up the total direct care expenses, the recruitment and retention expenses, the sales and marketing expenses, and then the operating expenses, that comes out to almost 120%. And when I look at this, knowing that $450,000 is the average person in this group here, that means the average person in this group spent almost $550,000 and generated 450. They spent 100 grand more than what they made. So that's one thing I'd like you to touch base on. But then the other part is when you look at all categories here, straight across the board, everybody is spending between 92 to 94% of the revenue that they generated, including the masters. Years past, the masters had a solid 15% left over as what we would call like net profit or EBITDA or whatever you want to call it. But to see that 92 to 94% of the revenue that we generate, we're spending in the business, that's alarming, because businesses should be operating at 15 to 20% profit margin. That's not my term. That's just business marketing or business economics 101. So, Tyler, what goes into some of these factors here from the data behind it? Where do we come up with these numbers here? Because I feel like this was so high, and it's significantly higher than it was in years past.
Yeah, so kind of explaining, what we're seeing here with this, profit and loss statement. At the top you have, median revenue for agencies of these various different sizes, and then below we have all the expenses broken up by these four categories: direct care expenses, caregiver recruitment and retention expenses, sales and marketing expenses, and operating expenses. And then all the percentages that you see here are a percentage of that median revenue number up at the top. So if you're looking for the specific number to get an idea of what the median was for each one of these, you can times that that percentage by the annual median revenue number there up at the top. And one of the trends here that you can pick up on pretty fast if you look at these subtotal rows is that direct care expenses, you can see that those go up as agencies get larger. Those are increasing, and compared to last year, we've seen some kind of big bumps, especially at the bookend. So at the 5 million and plus level, we've seen that go up about 5% from last year, total direct care expenses. And then also where Steve is highlighting at the lower end, so that 65% was closer to 60% last year. And that's in line with other responses that we've gotten from the benchmarking study this year. One of the new top threats that we hadn't seen in recent years is that there's a threat of increasing expenses. $15 minimum wage has always been a threat there that we see pretty commonly, but now we're seeing other agencies say that a top threat to their business is these other increasing expenses. And so that's something to be aware of and to look into. But as you work your way down this chart, another trend you'll see here is that with caregiver recruitment and retention expenses, sales and marketing expenses, and operating expenses, as your agency scales and grows bigger, those are going to decrease as a percentage of revenue pretty dramatically. So just case in point, caregiver recruitment and retention expenses go down from 5.2 to 1.9% as you get bigger. So there's some economies of scale and some optimizations that these larger agencies are making in order to have these lower numbers. So something good to keep in mind as you're analyzing this chart. And Steve, I believe, are you going to send out this slide in the webinar follow-up?
Yes, I could definitely do that because I want everybody to know that. And so I'm actually glad. And I also love this too. This is one of my favorite things that you had mentioned with it. As you look at all of these, just for keep in mind, folks, 8.7% of $1 million is a lot less money total than 2.9% of $7.5 million. So the percentage goes down as you scale up, but the dollar amount is probably still going to be more.
Right, that's correct.
So I love this, and so what would I do? This is what I would recommend to every single one of you. Take a look at what your expenses are. Get your expenses to a point where when every one of these 4 categories are coming together, you're left with a plus 15 to 20% left over. That's straight business economics 101. A business should be operating at 15 to 20% profit. If you can't cut expenses, and I get it, I know you can't, but look, I'm looking directly right here. Here's where the biggest cut is. Remember, I just told you 92 to 94% is what people are spending. Well, if you look at this first line in the direct care expenses, caregiver wages, we gave more away last year, right? This number needs to be no higher than 50%. How do you make it no higher than 50%? You got to raise your rates because you can't pay the caregivers less. They're commanding it right now, right? And because they're commanding it, we have to give the people what they want, right? And I'm going to be real, good caregivers, because of how hard this type of work is, they deserve it, right? So they're commanding it, and the good ones, they deserve it. So we have to raise our rates, and I know that means we're worried about pricing ourselves out of the market. I know we're worried about, well, the higher I go with my rates, Steve, the fewer people can afford it. I understand that. But this is where I always talk about, you got to have a consistent sales and marketing effort, boots on the ground, driving referrals. I want you all to write this down. This is something I've said 1,000 times over the years. Referrals equals freedom. Referrals equals freedom. If I have so much business coming in with referrals that every week I am turning away cases, that's a good thing. That means that I can now raise my rates to a point where I can afford to get the caregivers, keep those 50% margins that I'm talking about, which will give me that 15 to 20% left over at the end of the day, and I close accordingly. If you're not giving away business every single week, that means you are charging the right amount. But if you're turning away business because you can't get caregivers, that means that you're undercharging for services because you're not compensating what you need to be charging, compensating what you need to be compensating caregivers. You have to raise your rates initially and on your existing clients. And that's the part that a lot of people don't do. Yeah, I'm charging $30 an hour, but then I go through my client census and I look, wait a second, I have 20 clients who are still paying $24 an hour. Well, you have to get that person up. You have to take a look at it from that particular client. If my operating expenses are what I'm saying here, and I'm telling you that we got to get it to $30 an hour or 35 or whatever it is to make it so that we can make this business work. And I have somebody who's underpaying to the new rate by $5, $6 an hour. Technically, when I factor in all the expenses, providing care for that person who's undercharging, I'm actually paying for that person to get care because they're not paying enough because the margin isn't there. So you have to, and I know it sounds like odd, but Steve, I get it. But at the end of the day, this is a business, right? So what I recommend people do is you send out a letter to all your clients. Hey, effective as of July 1st, the rate will be increased. Here's your current rate, $24 an hour. Here's the rate that we charge new clients, $32 an hour. We're going to raise your new rate as of July 1st is $30 an hour. So we're not going to charge you what new clients pay as a thank you, but we have to charge you this. Otherwise, we can't provide the service because you're literally losing money to provide services for somebody who's underpaying. That's just dollars and cents. It is as black and white as I can make it. So seriously, take a look at this. Take a look at your numbers. Take a look at what you're charging new clients. Take a look at what you're charging each individual client. If you got a lot of folks grandfathered in, that's probably a big chunk of the reason and part of the reason why the profits were so low last year. You got to increase those profits. That's how you're going to expand. That's how you're going to grow. It's how you're going to give your staff raises. I know they're all asking for raises, right? Isn't everybody asking for a raise? Things cost more money. Now is the time Let's make this transition as an industry and make sure that our businesses are operating efficiently. Like, I'm serious. I love you guys. I want to make sure that you're operating the way that you should. Next slide here, Tyler. The client growth rate. So this right here, if I'm reading this correctly, this is talking about the client census growth. So if I was taking care of 100 people in 2019, in 2020, I averaged 105 clients on my census. Is that accurate?
That's right. So one of the things to make note of here is that the larger your agency is, the harder it is to usually have a higher growth rate. We usually see that growth rate start to decrease, and one of the trends that we've seen in the industry is the industry maturing, and we're seeing more consolidation, seeing agencies grow and get larger, and then it can be a little bit more difficult to grow, and you start to see a little bit lower growth rates here. We also had 2020 was a crazy year. We had COVID. There were a lot of challenges the agencies faced with recruitment and staffing that may have made it harder to grow. But we see the trend continue here, and it's something to be conscious of. And what I would encourage every agency here to do is to make sure that what are your growth rates. The whole purpose of the benchmarking study is really so that you can take these values and that you can compare them with how your agency is performing. And if you're participating in the study each year, then you've got your prep worksheet, you have that data, and you can compare that with the study. But if you don't, you can still run these calculations. For most of these are pretty simple metrics to get, or we provide the formulas and calculations so that you can pull those out and identify what your rates are, and you can compare those to what you have in the study. So that is essential, and I would encourage every agency to be tracking these numbers.
So the thing I would add to that, right, because you said a maturation of agencies, right? So I could totally see that. So especially if there's a certain percentage of your folks who participate in the study who participate every single year. So there's new people coming in, of course, but then you have like your core 500 and then your core 600, and then they slowly grow year after year. I think, would you have like 1,300, 1,400 locations participate in the study this year?
Right.
Right. So
right, yeah, that's the number of locations that's represented by the data. Yeah.
So 1,100 locations. So with that in mind, I'm sure there's a certain percentage that carried over, but I love the way you put it with the maturation. So if you find agency owners that you've reached a plateau point, right, that is the perfect time for me to you as a consultant myself. This is when you bring in a consultant, right? Because I figured out how to get this thing to where it is today. I need to do something different. And it doesn't have to be me. I'm not saying me, Steve the Hurricane. I don't care who you go with. But you could bring in somebody, and I've had a lot of clients who've done this where they've grown a business to say $5-6 million a year in revenue. And then all of a sudden they stay at this $5-6 million for a couple of years. And then that's when the business maybe needs to start going more corporate style. When you think about, again, knowing businesses, from the SBA, the Small Business Administration, a small business is considered a small business until it breaks $5 million in revenue. Then all of a sudden it now falls into a different category of what's known as a mid-sized company. It's also based on a certain number of employees. Well, mid-sized companies generate over $5 million, and many of them are generating 8 figures a year, over $10 million. There's a different hierarchy, a different structure, a different corporate model that goes in running a $10 million business than a $3 million business. So if we're stuck at this number and our census is only growing by this much year after year, I got to bring in some additional support to help me get my business from where it is to that next level, so that I'm back up to the 20-30% scalability that I was doing earlier in my career. So if you see that you've reached a maturation level and you've kind of gone up on a trajectory and then you kind of leveled off with your client census, that means it's time to do something different if growth is what you're trying to obtain. So I love it. This one's like the most obvious one, but I feel like we have to put this in here because there's still so many people that don't do it. But just Look at this, folks. This is, if you take this number here, 1.5 million to 2.4, that's like 50% more revenue if you track your inquiries. So like, case in point, please track your inquiries. Tyler, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so this, I don't want to sound like a broken record about, tracking your data, but I think that the trend here is pretty obvious. We've tracked this over years. We always know that there's a gap between agencies that are tracking every inquiry and agencies that don't. But here we're starting to see a clear separation. Agencies that aren't tracking, they're actually seeing a decrease in median revenue. Agencies that are tracking, they're on a steepening incline. And so I think this isn't just about tracking every inquiry. I think agencies that are tracking every inquiry are also tracking other things, and that's part of the reason why they're seeing an increase in their median revenue. It's about the philosophy that they use behind how they run their agency, and it's a different mindset when you're tracking that data and you're taking action on it. So I think it's a mindset. If you're not tracking every inquiry, I would look at what tools you can use in order to do that. Leverage your home care software, scheduling software, however you can. If you're doing something very basic, that's better than not tracking it at all. Like if you have to use an Excel spreadsheet, use an Excel spreadsheet. But there's tools out there that can help you keep track of this. There's call tracking metrics, other services that will help you keep track of inbound calls. So don't be afraid to leverage technology and look into ways that you can track these metrics. And also beyond just inquiry tracking, what other metrics do you think these other agencies are tracking? Identify your top metrics. We've got plenty of blog posts that we can share that outline some of the key metrics that your agency should track, depending on your size, where you're at, your geographic region. What you should be focused on may be a little bit different. And so I would identify what those metrics are and track them over time. Make sure that someone is responsible for reporting on them. And if you can stay on top of it that way, you will no doubt see it improve.
I love it, man. I love it. I'm not even going to say anything else to it except for just the only thing I'll throw out there as a way to improve your inquiry management is secret shop yourself. So either have a family member or a friend or you yourself as the owner call in your organization, pretend to be an inquiry, and discover how you're actually tracking and what you're doing on the phone. We do this as part of the services we do for our Home Care Elite Academy clients and our coaching clients. And most of these owners are mortified by what they find out when we do the secret shopper call. So secret shop yourself is something that I used to do when I had my $5+ million a year agency over a decade ago. I used to secret shop my agency probably about once every 3 months. I myself, or I get my brother or somebody else to do it, to just see how my people answering the phones are coddling relationships that are calling in. And if we don't do a good job, then it's time for inquiry training. If we're doing a good job, then you don't have to worry about it. You move forward. Next to the last one that we have here is the marketing sources. And so the biggest takeaway from my perspective was that you combined them. So you want to talk a little bit about this, Tyler?
Yeah, so year over year with the study, we try and keep as much as we can consistent while adding new metrics and optimizing how we're presenting the data to make it as actionable as we can for you. And some of the feedback that we got from a handful of agency owners was that there wasn't really a differentiation between between consumer sources and referral sources. We broke down the marketing sources, the sources where you're getting new clients from in two different ways back in our previous study. So we had your referral sources, these healthcare professionals would fall under that category, anyone that's referring you business, and then consumer marketing sources, which would include SEO, your clients, all of these others. And so we really wanted to bring those together so that you can see easier how they all compare. And the feedback that we had received was that a lot of agencies weren't making that differentiation. They just wanted to see what the list of top sources were for getting new clients. So that's a little bit of explanation about why we made that change. So a little bit of a shift here to to compare with last year, but by far the continuing trend, what we've seen previous years and what we see this year again is that clients and past past and current clients and their family members have been a top source of revenue. And I think it highlights the importance of focusing on providing a really good client journey and a really good experience, so that can continue to be a top source. There's lots of ways that this will have other impacts to other areas of your business. I mean, obviously, we know that we need to provide a good experience, and that it's essential to how everything else functions. But you can really start to get into some positive feedback loops with recruitment and retention if you can maintain a positive reputation and provide the best possible experience to your clients.
I love it. So moving forward, speaking of that best hospital experience when people are coming out and working with the accounts and whatnot, is this right here. And this right here, this number went down. In 2019, it was much higher than it was in 2020. And I'm sure because of COVID and all the issues that we had to deal with last year, that's part of where the tracking of readmission rates dropped significantly. But what I want to say to you as the industry is this. You saw the previous page, right? Hospitals, assisted living facilities, and skilled nursing facilities, right? 3 of the best referral sources for business, right? COVID last year, prior to COVID, in the industry that is healthcare, hospitals, rehab centers, all of the above, I feel like they were like at Thanksgiving dinner and they sat at the adult table. And then they put us, the private duty folks, at the kiddie table until COVID happened. Because when COVID happened, nobody wanted to go to an assisted living, nobody wanted to go to a nursing home. People were encouraged to stay away from hospitals unless you have COVID, whatever. We were trying to keep our seniors safe in the home. And so then the home care industry finally got to go from being at the kiddie table to the adult table, right? And now we're finally there. If we want to stay there, we have to be able to talk the language and walk the walk with our skilled healthcare counterparts. Tracking readmissions is something that they all are held accountable to. If we want to get referrals from them, we have to hold ourselves accountable to the same rules, even though it doesn't necessarily apply to us. So, that's if I want to grow my revenue this year and I want to get referrals from those accounts that are the best referrals that we just saw there, I got to be able to speak the language. We got to be tracking the readmissions. I know I kind of took a lot of this one, Tyler, but is there anything you want to say to that?
110%. That's exactly right. We're disappointed to see that this went backwards a little bit. There's a lot of things that I think we're distracted with due to COVID, and totally understand that. But the future is that we're a deeper, more integrated part of this continuum of senior care, and that we're more integrated, and we're taking that seat at the table with these other sister verticals. And what I would add to this, in addition to readmission rates, there are 5 metrics that we need to be tracking, and some of these I think are ones that the HCOA has even identified that agencies should be tracking, and they're making a push for this, and we're really starting to see things trend this way, where agencies are tracking more of these data points in order to be able to back up what we're doing and to show the outcomes of what we're doing. We have a huge impact on seniors, and it's time that we have the data to really show the benefits that we're providing. So in addition to readmission rates, I would encourage everyone to also track fall rates, ER visits, client OSAT, so that's overall satisfaction, and caregiver ENPS, so that's employee net promoter score is what that is. And these metrics will give you a head start and set you up for success here in the future as the industry evolves.
Will you repeat that one more time? I didn't see any questions, but I already know someone's going to ask. Can you repeat that? So I'm just going to ask.
Absolutely. So readmission rates, fall rates, ER visits, client OSAT, which is overall satisfaction ratings, and then caregiver ENPS, or employee net promoter score is what that stands for.
Employee Net Promoter Score. I love it. And so along those lines, and this is our last slide right here, is the home care pulse experience versus people who don't use it. So it's no wonder, as you're talking about these 5 categories, readmissions being one of them, but a lot of that net promoter score from the employee experience, the overall client satisfaction, those last 2, those are things that you guys do at Home Care Pulse. And look at this revenue difference, folks. This is $300,000 in revenue difference from having it. So, you wanted to speak to that real quick, Tyler?
Yeah, this is another trend that's been consistent. I mean, you see the line over the years that, not for non-users agencies that aren't focused on managing their client and caregiver experience, revenue is a little bit more unstable. But for those that are engaged and paying attention to what their clients and caregivers are saying and taking action on it, you see that revenue increase year over year. So, obviously we're huge fans of listening to your clients and caregivers, analyzing that data, taking action on it, filling gaps with training where clients are saying that caregivers are they don't know how to do X or Y, and identifying those issues quick and then acting on them and providing your clients and caregivers what they need to have a positive experience. And it starts with mapping out your client and caregiver journey and having an action plan and setting aside time in your organization to be able to review what your clients and caregivers are saying. And we obviously help automate that. We're big fans of surveying and analyzing the data from your clients and caregivers. But I think a lot of the data here just speaks for itself and what that accomplishes. So whether you're using Home Care Pulse or you're just trying to grow your business, I would encourage you to find some way to measure your client and caregiver experience on a consistent basis.
I love it. And folks, I'm just going to be point blank with you on this, right? I've been doing a lot of work with Home Care Pulse over the last 9 years as a consultant myself, right? And I have a lot of mutual clients of theirs. I know that they have different services and packages and programs and stuff, and but it's safe to say that an average expenditure with Home Care Pulse for these services is around $3,000 a year, right? And so when I look at this and I see that for $3,000, I could have a $300,000 revenue difference, that is literally for 1% of the revenue return difference, I'm going to make that money. I don't know a single entrepreneur out there who wouldn't invest 1% of the return. Literally, it's 99 times your investment is what you're going to get back on it. 1% is the cost to make that difference in revenue of $300,000. That is the easiest decision you have to make if you're not a member of Home Care Pulse. And then just throwing it out there because that's just how my mind works with it. But you want to maximize revenue, do what people who are maximizing revenue do, right? And so with that in mind, Tyler, thank you so much. I know you have to go soon. I don't know if you could stay on a little bit longer for the Q&A, but I'll do my best to answer the Q&A. I'll stay on for another 15 minutes, but if you can stay, great. But for everybody, if you want to get the benchmark study, as our thank you to you for being here, here's a 25% discount code. You just enter Hurricane 25%. Real easy. Hurricane 25%. When you go to checkout, and they'll take 25% off the full price of the benchmark study. And if you're interested in more information about Home Care Pulse's products and the services and the things that they do, just contact info@homecarepulse.com. Info@homecarepulse.com, and they'll be more than happy to give you a demo and go through all the different things that they can do to help you get those data tracking that's going to help you to be able to keep your seat at the table, the big adult table of the healthcare industry in your marketplace. So I wanted to make sure I throw this out there to you. So Tyler, thank you so much. Can you stay on for a couple minutes, or do you got a jet?
I've got a couple minutes. I can hang out here.
Okay, awesome. So we're at the free gift. I want to give everybody the free gift. All right, and remind everybody, so the free gift, what I'm gonna do right now for every person who's on here, I'm gonna write down a number on the table here, on my table, yeah. On a sheet of paper, I'm gonna write down a number, and I'm gonna hold it up in a second, and the number is 1 through 10. And where it says questions, right now, I want you to type down what number you think I'm writing down here. So you can't see me, right? I'm writing down the number, and the number is, okay? And so I want you to type where it says numbers, or sorry, where it says questions rather, a number. And the first person who answers the number correctly is gonna win the prize. And the prize I'll announce in a second. So the first person who got it right, here's the number. It's 6. 6 is the number, and the first person who guessed 6 was, I'm scrolling down, Fernando. Fernando, awesome, Fernando. So we will reach out to you later on, Fernando. You have won a complimentary ticket to the boot camp. Yes, the Billionaires Boot Camp is that's later on this year, November 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So Fernando, I think if you're the Fernando I think you are, you can drive there. But if you're not, you can always fly in the Philadelphia airport and get to the boot camp. All the details are on the website right here, homecaremarketing.net/virtual boot camp. And everybody, you're welcome to attend. The full price ticket, like I said, is $1,000. And if you want to get a ticket and save on it right now, you can do so. Save $400. Those early bird tickets, there's only 100 of them. We already have 50 spots taken. That's 20% of the attendees are already gone. So there's only so many tickets left at the early bird price. Save your money, get in now. This event will sell out. So I'm going to leave this up here while I start answering some of these questions with Tyler here. So let me go back to the top of the questions section. All right, and so first question here is, Tyler, is there any data that points to the reasons why the turnover rate is higher in the digital recruitment arena?
As far as data that specifically explains, why that is, I think there's, I don't know if there's anything in the study that directly explains why that is, but I think it's one of the things that we do know is that when caregivers are recruited from your reputation or from other employees, they're much more likely to stay. If you recruit from caregivers that are already engaged with you, it's likely that their friends are going to be other good fit individuals, and so that's a clear indicator that we've seen of why those sources have a lower rate. I think one of the reasons why these digital sources have a much higher turnover rate is you're just pulling from such a larger pool of individuals that are all throughout various backgrounds and industry types and goals. And so it's a good question. I don't have any data on that specifically at my fingertips, but that would those would be some of my best guesses around why the turnover rates are what they are for that.
Awesome, I love it. Another question I have here, I don't know all these acronyms that Lisa had put in here, but basically what she's saying, paraphrasing, is how do you recommend attacking the situation of cutting expenses at the same time when salaries are being raised in the market?
Yeah, I think that one of the strategies that we've seen some agencies take advantage of is offering specialty care and training their caregivers and creating a strategy where they're focused on providing care for specific scenarios like dementia or Alzheimer's care, and looking for other ways that they can justify higher billing rates by providing specialty types of care, and then from that also being able to offer caregivers higher wages. So that's one strategy that we've seen. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but I think that's one thing to take a serious look at.
I love what you said there, Tyler. And to Lisa, who asked the question, I think you may have asked the question, because I'm looking at the time when you asked the question. You might have asked the question before I talked about increasing our rates and then increasing the rates to our existing clients, taking a look at who's actually so far below, like we haven't given a price increase in a while to, and determining if we're going to keep this person on services or not. We're going to raise their rates. If they say, no, I'm not going to have it, I'm going to leave you, then we have to let that person go, kind of a thing. So that's one aspect of it with raising the rates. The other side of it is do an internal audit. So, you know, when Tyler and I, and this is what I love about having Tyler on here, because Tyler gives us the nuts and the bolts and the meat and the potatoes behind all of the data that's collected. And then the reason why I like doing this with him is because I'm a consultant and I work with home care agencies all the time. And so when I hear him say certain things, that means my response would be, I'm going to have my client do X, Y, and Z. So I would do an audit. You know, how much am I spending on each acquisition source for caregivers, on each acquisition source for patients, on all of the data, all of the software and the marketing and the advertisements, my website, the SEO, like do an internal audit of all of your expenses and see what you can remove. My staff and I last year, one of the best things about COVID was the remote period, right? Where we all had to go remote and we weren't coming together every single day. And then that is where I got a real solid look at what were the support softwares and vendors and everything else that I use to run my company, Hurricane Marketing Enterprises, that we actually really need versus what are ones that I'm wasting money on. And I started to realize that we were having way too many meetings. We were using way too many different software products and programs, and we were using Asana, which is it's like a project management software. I'm like, why are we using Asana for this? This is a waste of money. Asana cost me $1,500 a year, you know, and so I got rid of it. And I got rid of this one. I got rid of that one. I ended up finding a solid like $10,000, $12,000 in programs and support systems and this and that we were using that we didn't need. And so I ended up pulling the plug on it, and that $10,000, $12,000 was now profit that we didn't have. So what would I say to you on that? Obviously, raise our rates, increase it, but also do an internal audit and take a look at where we're spending our money. Maybe we do it once a year, once every 6 months, clean up and polish, because I guarantee businesses, as we start to get to, you know, I have a multi-million-dollar business. You know, you might at least have a multi-million-dollar business. These home care businesses, you know, if you had a multi-million-dollar business, I guarantee there's overspending in areas that we're not even aware of, that if we sit down and take a look at it and do an internal audit, we could probably find some ways to save us a solid $5 to $10, $20, maybe even $50,000 by being more efficient. So take a look at that, all right? The last question that we have asked here, Tyler, is what is the best tool to start tracking data? What software?
Yeah, that's a good question. We aren't partial to any particular software. There's a lot of options out there for agencies to use. You know, Clear Care, Access Care, Ally Care. There's you know, list goes on. We're integrated with a bunch of those and work closely with them. So I would you know, focus on not just what software you're using, but make sure that you're leveraging it to, you know, the greatest extent that you can, and don't be afraid to, you know, reach out and get, you know, your training from, you know, their support team on, you know, the various features that are available to you, and maximize that software. Most you know, all software out there, you know, right now has, you know, some way to track, you know, a lot of these metrics, or a lot of the, you know, similar overlapping features. And I think you can't go wrong with a lot of them. And so I'd recommend looking at you know, what each one offers you, and make sure you know the various ways that you can leverage it and all the features that are available to you in that software.
Tyler, great answer. I'll echo that. Everything that you said is exactly it. Go with who you feel most comfortable with. I will add to it, take a look at which one allows you to get what you are most need of, right? What do I mean by that? If I'm a real techie and I'm real advanced and I want my business to be very efficient, then you're going to want to go with the Clear Cares, the Access Cares, the Ancodas, the bigger ones. if I'm not real techie and I need a lot of hand holding, I need a lot of customer service, a lot of customer support, I would recommend going with a smaller company like Smart Care or even Swift Ops from Frax. Somebody who's who they're not as big as the giants, so you're going to get more customer service because they have fewer clients. They can give you more hand holding to help you through it. The other point I would make on the software that you choose too is consider the future benefit of your organization. So if I am a private duty, but I want to add skilled nursing at one point, or I want to add a home health counterpart, or I want to go hospice and add that to the service offerings that I do, then I would want to have a software that has the capacity to add all of that to it. So there's a bunch of different variables that it comes to when choosing a software. Choose what's best for you, but just consider all the different things that we just said here when you're making your decision. So that's it, everybody. Tyler, again, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. It was an honor to be here, Steve. And I hope that if anyone has any questions about the study, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us at info@homecarepulse.com. If you have questions for me, you can reach me at tyler@homecarepulse.com. Happy to connect and answer whatever questions we can. We know that we shared a lot. We covered a lot of ground with the study, and there's a lot of data to unpack and analyze. And so we're happy to share what knowledge we can. We've got a lot of resources that we can point you towards on our blog, on our resource library, if there's specific tools that you're looking for. So happy to be of whatever assistance we can there.
I love it. And folks, from me to you again, thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure. Sunday is my 9-year anniversary of starting Hurricane Marketing Enterprises. So it's been almost 9 full years of serving the home care industry. I love this industry. I love you. I hope to see you all at the Home Care Millionaires Boot Camp this November 17th, 18th, and 19th. All the details are right there. Get your early bird tickets, reserve your spot, mark your calendar now. This event it's going to be something very, very special. After doing that one 4 weeks ago in Houston, the test pilot, back to doing things in person again, boot camp, the energy, the feel, every person was like, this is exactly what I needed. Like I was so tired of the virtual, and I know this event it's going to sell out. It's going to sell out. Be there, save your money. You want to go. It's going to be amazing. Sales and marketing, operations, recruitment and retention, everything to scale your figure to multiple 7 figures and even break into 8 figures and beyond. So love you guys. God bless. Thank you for your time. Talk to you soon.